Okay, and so just hit the record button. I think we're ready to go. So good evening, everyone. Bonsoir. Pour la réunion de ce soir, je m'exprimerai en anglais, mais si vous avez des questions, veuillez les poser dans la langue de votre choix et nous y répondrons de mieux possible. Ou nous vous recontacterons pour vous fournir plus d'informations plus loin ce soir ou demain. Okay? So if anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. The way we're trying the screen setup, I may not see raised hands, so please don't hesitate to sort of interrupt politely and let me know. If there are questions that are being put into the chat, I also can't guarantee that I'm going to see them right away unless we have another staff person come on. Um, uh, so if that's okay, I'll get to questions sort of at the end if you've put them in the chat. But as I said, I'll pause every couple slides in order for people to pose questions. Okay, with that said, let's get going. Oh, so I click on the right thing, that would help. There we go. So just a reminder, welcoming environment in Boxing Canada. I had the privilege of being down in Windsor this past weekend and actually in Calgary I can't believe it was just last night, but just last night visiting um, with um, visiting Ontario provincials in Windsor and then just some boxing clubs while I was out at a conference in Calgary. And it is always great to see so many positive faces out in our boxing environment, enjoying our sport. And I just have to say, I think everyone's doing a really great job underlining these safe sport principles and trying to have an inclusive culture. So congratulations to all. For the agenda tonight, so it'll be a quick update on the Safe Sport program, and there is actually some interesting and pertinent news on that that will make everyone's lives a little easier. We'll talk a little bit about the selection dashboard, a little bit about the U23 camp that starts up this weekend in Montreal. Quick nod to what's going on at Elite Nationals, which is coming up in November. We're just a month out. A little bit about our 2025 to 2032 high performance plan, a little bit about our national team plan and some of the updates there. And we're going to do kind of a walkthrough of sort of what the different athlete pathways are in that plan, and then some other notes and some upcoming calendar dates. I do have Ray Napper sending me messages here on my phone, and I can't figure out what he's sending them to me in. Oh, there he is. Can you please send me the Zoom link? Oh, I don't know. Can I? Can someone send Ray the Zoom link? Um, I'm not sure that I've got it available here with how I've got my setup. Let's see if I can without disrupting anything. I may have just disrupted everything. Ah, Ray. Okay.
I'll do it, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I appreciate Chris's stick together. I appreciate that. Okay, let's see if I can get back into doing this the way I want to be doing this. No, that's not that one. This one. Okay, and get sharing happening again. Share screen. Yeah, this one and this one. Okay. All right, we're back. Okay, so back on to the agenda. So updates on Safe Sport. So we had a very interesting meeting with Safe Sport last week, a good meeting. And they have had so many people from Boxing Canada register into their system in the past, well, last half of last week, that they have reconsidered how many people actually need to be involved in this level of Safe Sport with the Safe Sport 2025 program. And they have changed their mind a little bit about the requirement for people who are competing or coaching at nationals, and whether they need this new course or whether an existing um, respect in sport course or the national coach certification program safe sport course will be adequate. And they have said, look, you don't need to do the new one. The other ones are adequate. Don't keep pushing people into the program if we don't absolutely need to. So thank you everyone who did go through and do the course. If you are a national level athlete, that's you are representing Canada at any given time. If you are a national level coach, so one of our staff, or you are coaching on tour with one of our national team tours, or if you're a national level official who will be operating at nationals, you still need to do the course. And of course. And if you are a board member or your staff, you still need to do this course. So again, thank you everyone who've been through it, and we really appreciate that. But we got a little bit of a reprieve. So I spent some of this weekend going through the handbook for nationals and rewriting some of that section about the minimum standards. The nice thing is though that if you have the higher standard, you have the higher standard and it covers you off. So no worries for anyone who has taken the opportunity to go through. Okay, looking at our selection dashboard. So there have been no updates lately because we haven't had any competitions. However, we are about to have our U23 camp. It's starting up this weekend on Saturday, and we will be doing updates as soon as we have the results done out of that camp, because at the U23 camp, there are assessments being done of athletes, and we will have some movement of athletes with our categorization system. So is an athlete at the World Cup level? Are they at a podium potential level? Are they at an emerging level? Or are they at a national squad level? And so that movement will happen. And then following nationals in Winnipeg, that's November coming up in a month. Once we've got the results of nationals and the assessments that are also done at nationals on the seniors, then we will finally have our last updates to all of our selection dashboards. And that includes our karting dashboards, so our athlete assistance program, and athlete categorization. And we will have some notes going out about initial selections, either on the A pathway or the B pathway for athletes. But we're gonna talk about that in a second. Okay, I'm gonna move right into some little notes about our assessment camp. So just a reminder what the goals are. We are looking to take U23 athletes and see if any of them are meeting our winning style of play um, assessment criteria that says that they may be capable of meeting sort of a top eight result at a world challenge. And if you remember early or this year, we had athletes competing at a world challenge, and we came away with a silver medal, a gold medal, and a couple of strong top eights. So the opportunity is there, but we are really looking for U23 athletes. So athletes earlier in their career who have been able to demonstrate performance earlier. That's what we're looking for. And we had a pretty extensive list of athletes who we identified and invited to the U23 camp. And we can see what that list is, right? So, all the U20, U19 Brandenburg team were there. Anyone who went to Winnipeg who were U23 for the Melee Gala. Uh, Looking at our nationals results out of Quebec, the U23 best two, the U19 best two. And at that nationals, there were a small number of additional athletes that we would have internally as the national team invited to come along to the camp. We also extended an invitation out to the provinces to say, hey, have we missed anyone off of the invite list? And if we have missed someone who the provinces feel would really benefit from the camp and are within the potential of being identified as an emerging athlete, we want them to be there. We want to sort of have everyone feel as included as possible to make sure that we're casting as wide a net as we possibly can for this critical assessment opportunity. Who are the coaches that we've got? We've got Coach Samir, Coach Ariane, Coach Ulissa, Coach Tariq, and we've got a whole bunch of personal coaches who will also be there. There are a few athletes who we know are coming who have not yet registered, and that is a problem. And we will correct that on the first day of camp if needed. But if you need to register, of course, we've got the registration link available here. It's also up on our website and a bunch of other places. If anyone has been unable to register, we can certainly do that on site the first day, but we will make sure everyone is registered. Okay. Uh, and I just want to talk a little bit about what we're actually doing for the assessment. So um, we have divided up our coaches into teams, and multiple coaches will be assessing each athlete. And we're using the winning style of play framework. And I apologize, I just realized I haven't linked it anywhere on this slide. So I'll rectify that as soon as the meeting is over. Um, but it is important for you to understand there is no sort of set standard for an athlete to hit. And I'll show you an example in a second of how we use this tool. But the winning style of play tool gives us a score that we can then compare against international data. And when we finished up the Olympics, both our full-time coaches, head coach Vincent and senior national team coach Samir, they went through video of every athlete who was at the Olympics, every athlete for whom we had video on, who was at the World Challenge Cup in Czech, and every athlete who was at the World Cup in Kazakhstan, and every athlete who competed at the recent World Championships in September in Liverpool. And we started building out this data set that would say, this is what these international high quality athletes look like, and what does their field strength look like, and how does that compare to the field strength that we have at home? So let's take a look at one of these comparative assessments. And this slide, just so you know, we put together and we were using at our On the Podium review meeting, which actually just happened today. I just got back from there. And what we see on this is sort of an overview of the performances that we had tracked at our 2024 Elite and U23 National Championships. We combined those two classes, and we took all those athletes and we plotted them out on the left-hand side of the screen. And we have one athlete here, which happens to be Marie, and her average score that we were getting on the assessment was a 21.9, which was significant. The next highest group of athletes were down at sort of the 14 and a half and under within her weight class. We compare that against what we got in looking in this particular data set is looking strictly at the Olympics in 2024, but in the same weight class. And out of all the bouts and all the athletes for whom we did assessments, what we see is first, the majority of the results are significantly higher than what we've got here in Canada, which is kind of what you'd expect. The best result is significantly higher at the Olympics than what we had back in Canada. And it's a full category of athletes, right? So it was a full, whatever it was, 16 or 18 or however many athletes competing. And even though this is not a perfect science, and I mean, on the podium, we made sure they knew this and we know this. We took a look at if Marie had been at the Olympics and had somehow been able to perform with exactly the same level of skill demonstrated, and as assessed through this tool, which is not the same as results, it's a performance assessment, then would she have been competitive within that data set? And There are a whole bunch of reasons why there's error in this. We fully acknowledge that, and we fully acknowledge it, of course, in front of OTP. This is not a direct one-to-one comparison between the Canadian women's 57 and the international women's 57. But we're sort of early days with this, and we're sort of doing this comparison. And what we're saying is that this level of score that was demonstrated was similar to a top eight at the Olympics. Does that mean that this particular athlete is guaranteed of getting a top eight at the Olympics? No, absolutely not. But is it interesting to know that at one point that our athletes at home are able to demonstrate a high level of competency? And if they were able to recreate that level of competency, that would be great, right? And they would do well on that assessment tool, which, and I remind everyone, the assessment tool is not the same as results, right? Because you can do really well on the assessment tool and not place very well. You can also do very poorly on the assessment tool and you can win the entire tournament, right? So it's not a direct one-to-one, but it makes for interesting conversation. And it certainly made for interesting conversation today with our friends on the podium. So this is the type of report that we are using in order to identify who are our top performers in the U23 category at the upcoming camp. Each athlete will come away from that camp with a report where we have assessed each of their sparring bouts, and we will write down some notes about their performance with some coachable statements, right? Here's 3 things that you can work on in order to improve your ability to compete within the Canadian environment at your weight class. Okay. So very trying to go for very concrete feedback that coaches can use in order to help improve their athletes and just from an outside perspective. If we see that we've got some standout athletes, then there is a possibility that we would name them as emerging within our athlete classification system. Again, that's world class, podium potential, emerging, and national squad. It could also be that we don't see anyone who really is setting the world on fire, and in that case, we would not identify anyone. But everyone will come away from that camp with having done a bunch of sparring, a bunch of training. We'll get a bunch of feedback from a bunch of great coaches, and we'll come away with this report. Okay. So anyone have any questions about the upcoming U23 camp? Because it literally is starting in like 48 hours or slightly more.
Is the provinces registering the people like the gold and the medal, the gold and silver from Ontario? Is maybe that's a question for Ray or somebody else. Is the province doing the registering? Because we let the province know that they're going.
Okay.
How are we sure that that information gets to you?
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I've been preoccupied with the OTP thing today, so I I haven't actually gone and done a look. I do know that Naomi was going to put those registrations through, and I know we had some communication with her earlier in the week about it, so I would trust that that's happened. Like I said, if it comes that someone shows up and they're unregistered, we will take care of that. We'll figure out an appropriate solution. So no one's going to get turned away from the camp if if they show up. So
Hey Chris, how does the physical testing factor into this matrix, if at all, or is that something separate and in addition to what's going on?
yeah, Jesse, great question. So I would suggest that it is separate and in addition. And I don't have an example of the physical testing report that will come back, but there will also be a physical testing report coming back that attempts to do something similar. So here's the result that this particular athlete had, say, in grip strength or counter movement jump. Um, and here is sort of the range of scores that we assessed during the camp. Here's what we believe for this weight category would be let's say an entry, like a gatekeeping result, right? So for say men's 60 kilo male, grip strength, we'd really like to see, I don't know, 55 pounds of grip strength. I'm making something up there. I'm not entirely sure. And if you are anywhere above that, we think, you know what, grip strength, not a problem for you. But, if someone comes away with a grip strength twice the average, that's fantastic. But grip strength alone isn't going to win anyone a boxing match, right? So, um, so it's really about identifying where have we got what we might think of as a deficiency in the overall physical preparation of an athlete that we can address in time for next season. Um, or is this just a natural thing where, some people just naturally are not beep test athletes, right? Some people are not squat test athletes. But that doesn't necessarily mean they can't box extremely well and potentially even up to a world-class level. But it does go and say, like, if I'm the athlete who's getting the worst score of the entire field, that gives me a cue that, okay, maybe I need to work on my I can't remember what the term was that I heard when I was down in Windsor. Street work? Footwork, not footwork, street work, right? When you're out doing your runs out the back of the back of the gym. So anyway, road work. That was it. Road work.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Any other questions on sort of what's going on at the camp? Okay, with that, I will continue on. So looking at Elite Nationals, so we continue to make minor updates to the handbook as we get questions, and we're trying to clarify those questions. So registration has to be done by the province. If the province chooses, they could be allowing athletes to run their own registration simply because the province is not interested in paying for everyone. In which case your province will give you a password in order to be able to do that registration. In general, each province is allowed 2 athletes per weight class, plus any athletes from your province who were a past 2024 elite champion, or they were an elite runner-up, or they were a 2025, that's this back past June in Quebec, U23 champion, or you're granted a wild card spot. That's great. That's how you get in. And the provinces have a system for knowing how many wild cards they have available to them. Our goal is to fill each of the weight classes full up to 16. That's what we're ultimately trying to get to. We all know we're not going to get there in all of the weight classes that are available, but I suspect we're going to get close. The goal of this competition is to have the best elite aged athletes available to compete. And that means elite aged, so 19 up to, what is it, 40. And as per the Canadian rulebook, if you're in your last year as a youth athlete, so you were 18 years old in your competition age for 2025, then you can compete up. So anyone who has competed as a U23 at our U23 champions, our last year youth, and any of our elites, they of course are eligible. We do have a seeding system because if we've got large weight classes, we certainly don't want to have conflict between the number 1 and number 2 seeds like in the first round. That's not how we want to be running our competitions. We want to spread those athletes out. But we've got this system of how we are going to seed those athletes. We are also going to, as best as we can, attempt to avoid provincial conflict during the first round. If every athlete in a category is coming from just 2 provinces, we make no guarantees. But if we've got a good mix of athletes coming from a variety of different provinces, we have got a way that we've figured out within the math of the seating system that we can try to make sure they are separated. No one should be flying halfway across our country simply to have their first bout against someone who they just fought against at provincials. right? Like that's not, it's not meeting the goals of the national championships. So and then we've sort of updated our safe sport requirement, as I said earlier. All coaches must complete either the Respect in Sport or the NCCP safe sport program. And the majority of you, of course, have done that, and we of course appreciate for all the hard work that you guys have done there. Any questions on elite nationals?
Chris, so are you saying 2007s can move up and fight elite in Manitoba?
I don't have the guide in front of me. We've got a tool available on the website where you just put in your actual date of birth and it tells you exactly what that is. If your fighting age is 18 in 2025 season, then yes, you are eligible according to the Canadian rulebook. It'd be your second
Okay,
year
thanks.
of being at youth. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's move on here. So, we're going to dive into the NTP a little bit tonight, but just a reminder, the document is, I mean, final is it's a loose term in boxing, of course. We continue to have lots of highlighted areas on the document that we will continue updating because we simply don't have information about some competitions yet, primarily World Boxing, World Challenge level competitions. The World Boxing simply hasn't released this information yet. The long format of the document is extremely important. It's got exactly why we're going to particular competitions or tours or camps with our goals. It's got how to get selected to that tour or camp or competition. And we are adding in some of them, it's already there, but some of them we're still working on. If we are having an opportunity for personal coaches to go and participate, what the criteria must be for those personal coaches to get selected. And there will I do not think we will ever have a tour where we have an unlimited number of personal coaches that we will have invited. That would be unwieldy. So whatever that limit on how many personal coaches we're taking and how we would differentiate if we had 4 applications, but we only had 2 people, 2 spots available, how would we make that selection? Very much like how we select for athletes. Okay. And also new this year, if we are in a position where we are being asked to bring an official or multiple officials, there will be a selection process built into the national team plan around how those official selections are going to go. Because we are now back in a situation where we have international competitions asking Canada to send officials. Now, for any of our world boxing level competitions, we don't get asked. World Boxing reaches out directly to their officials on their certified list, and they make the selections and take care of all those details. So this is not for World Boxing challenges. This is not for World Cups. It's not for Commonwealth Games, and it's not for the Continental Championships. But for other levels of competition, this selection system will be put into place. And I can think of 3 or 4 opportunities for officials. And in fact, primarily around camps where we are interested in having officials come into those camps in order to assist our athletes and our coaches to understand what kind of uh, international style nuances the judges are going to be looking for, because we obviously want our athletes to be as well prepared for the competitive experience as possible. Okay, with that, let's get into some of the nitty gritty. So when I look at sort of what are some of our overall philosophies, so this idea of you are selected, you are included until we have a concrete reason to exclude you. And as soon as I said the word exclude, I felt a little weird inside. But this idea that you're in until you're out, right? So we are trying our best to be thinking in terms of as many people included as possible. And then if you don't make selection criteria, or there isn't a weight category available for you, or you've been selected to some other competition that precludes your ability to compete, or you've got school commitments, that's fine. We will then exclude you or unselect you out of that activity at that point. But we're trying our best to be thinking all the time in our head that everyone is included up until such time as we know that they're not. The next philosophical principle, and I think some of you have probably heard me say it, competition has consequences. And this is in terms of winning, right? So the best way to get yourself selected to something is to be number one and to have wins when we ask you to have wins. That's not to say that losses are the end of the world, right? Performance can still happen even though the end result of a bout was a loss. But the best way to have a consequential impact on selection is to do well in those competitions. Okay? The other area where this clicks in is if we've had an athlete come back from an injury. If you come back from an injury and you compete, you don't get to then blame that injury for a poor performance. If you're good enough to come back, then we want you to be good enough to feel like you're competing at 100% and not, down at 90 or 70 or whatever, right? We want people healthy. We want people having the best opportunity to perform at their best. So any athlete who's coming back from injury, like this is something to keep in mind. Let's make sure that you are absolutely healthy enough that whatever was affecting you is not going to continue affecting your performance, because you will then be judged by your performance. My next one, everyone is the same because everyone is different. So we do treat every single one of our athletes differently. And the reason why is because every single one of our athletes is different. Everyone's on a slightly different pathway in order to get to the goals that Boxing Canada has for the high performance program. So if you are looking to get treated exactly the same way as another athlete, that is not going to happen. Okay. But that doesn't mean that we're picking favorites. What it means is if we've got an athlete who has submitted a YTP that says that they're trying to peak for Commonwealth Games, we're going to hold them accountable to that. Whereas if we have another athlete who's trying to peak for nationals, we're going to hold them accountable to that, right? We're not going to hold everyone accountable to one single standard across the entire field of athletes. It just doesn't make sense. That said, we are very, very picky about making sure that we are doing our best to follow our own criteria. That's one of the reasons why we're trying to get the criteria published as early as we can, and why we have these meetings to talk about those criteria as they come up. Because if we've put it in writing that this is how we're operating, this is how we want to be judged by how we're making decisions about athletes. And the last philosophy here is the right athlete at the right competition at the right time. So we all know, and we use the YTP example with peaking at different times, but some athletes are going to be ready to go first thing January 1st, 100%, send me out to the World Cup. Other athletes are not going to be ready for that. And we want to have athletes going to competitions where they have a strong opportunity for success. Not a guarantee of success, right? There has to be some level of challenge. But we want them to go into competition thinking, you know what? I have a chance to win. Because we don't want to be constantly sending athletes to a level of competition that is too high for them, because they're only getting one bout, they're losing that bout, and they're not learning how to win successive back-to-back bouts in competition, right? The reality of Olympic style boxing, you guys all know it, is that it's all fine and good to be able to win one bout, but if you want to win a gold medal at a major championships, even a Canadian championships, you need to be able to compete and win again and again and again and again, right? Four times if you're in a round of 16. And if you're at an international competition, potentially even more than that. So um, I think all athletes should be cognizant that if you're not winning regularly at the level of competition you're at, you have to question whether you're at the right level of competition. And constantly losing is not going to help you improve, right? With very few exceptions, where strategically there may be opportunities there. But in general, this is what we're looking at. So here's a new graphic. And I realize I might be off by a day. I think it may actually be 995 days until the LA Olympics. My apologies to everyone who's marking it off on their calendars. But when we go from more than 1,000 days before the Olympics to fewer than 1,000 days, in my mind, in my gut, everything starts to get just a little more real. And the next major milestone is when we get down to fewer than 365. And then every time we hit over another 100, once we get past 300 down to 299, once we hit 199 after 200, once we hit 99, my excitement and my anxiety levels just pop up that little bit extra. So the question was coming into me, Chris, in simple terms, how do I get selected to go to the Olympics? Well, we tried to put that down into as simple a diagram as possible. I'm not sure that we've got it completely yet, but here's what we're looking for. So there's a bunch of things that you need to do in advance. You need to be a member. You need to be a member of a boxing club. You need to hold a valid medical, right? You need to have a Canadian passport or permanent residency. You need to, be at this level, you need to be Canadian Safe Sport Program compliant because you're trying to be a member of the national team. Then, once you've got all that done, step one, you got to go and meet your provincial standards. Step two, you need to demonstrate performance, and you can do that in two ways within our system. You can either win, it's part of the performance pathway, so winning at U19, winning at U23s, winning at elite nationals. And when I say winning, like winning multiple bouts, right? Because technically it's number one or number two, but we're selecting, but let's not get into too many details. This is the diagram. Or you can get selected through, or you can demonstrate performance through the assessment pathway. So if you're a U23 athlete, we've got our performance assessment camp that's starting up in a few days. If you're going to elite nationals, you can demonstrate and be assessed there and at our elite national team camp in January. We can do assessments there as well. It is more difficult to move through these steps towards the Olympics if you're only being assessed on your performance and not actually winning bouts. Okay, just so everyone knows, it's an easier pathway to go the bottom way. Then step three, we'll categorize you as an athlete. And the first level of categorization, national squad, or if you're U23, are you part of this small group of emerging athletes who are developmentally ahead of most other athletes their age? And once we've got you categorized, we see you compete internationally. And from here, we start at the bottom of the slide and we move up. You have the opportunity to compete in international open tournaments, and this would usually be with your club or your province. And then if that's going well, then we've got this higher level of tournament, which is the Team Canada dual meets. So things like the Melee Gala in Winnipeg, things like the Battle of the Prairies. And we are, fingers crossed, going to have two or three more of these opportunities where Canadian national team athletes are competing against another national team set of athletes who have been invited into Canada. Makes for a great show. We're really excited about adding on a few more of these opportunities. Then the next level up above this is have we selected you to compete at international tournaments? Right. And when I'm talking about major international tournaments, this is your world challenges. Okay. And potentially some of our lower multi-sport games like Commonwealth Games. And then the highest level, are we competing at World Cups and are we competing at World Championships? Right. If you're not able to successfully compete at a World Cup or a World Championship, the chances of you being selected for the Olympics is low, right? Let's get that out of the way. It's low. It's not impossible, but it's low. Okay. And then our actual Olympic qualification system. So you can do any one of these four things. I'm going to start at the bottom because chronologically it's actually the earliest. Have you been able to get a top
This is a
two?
lot better round.
Have you been able to get a top two at the World Championships in 2027? Right? So we've got some time ahead of that. Then after that, in later 2027, have you been able to get a top two at the Pan Am Games? Then, if you still haven't qualified, there'll be an international Olympic qualifier. We believe this will be World Cup number 1 in 2028. And then if you still haven't qualified, are you able to get a top two at Olympic qualifier number 2, which we believe will be the second World Cup, or will be in place of the second World Cup in 2028. And those 2028 dates, that looks a lot like what happened for this past Olympic cycle, where we had Olympic qualifier in Thailand and we had Olympic qualifier in Italy, right? And as soon as you meet one of those standards, you are going to the Olympics, right? Even though the World Championships in 2027, that's a full like 15 months before the games, but you are locked in, and that place is yours by name. So if Chris Lindsay qualifies in men's 65, but I'm injured or I retire or whatever, that spot doesn't stay with Canada. Canada doesn't get to give that to the next most deserving 65 kilo male. That spot goes back into the pot internationally for someone else to try to win. Okay. It's a cutthroat system that World Boxing has adopted, but it looks, like I said, very much like what we were doing for the last games in Paris. Any questions about this? Because I'm actually really interested in feedback, because if there's some way that we can make this more clear, that'd be great. The other thing I will say, the colors are a little weird, but the colors are actually designed to match up with colors on another diagram that we're going to talk about with the NTP. So there is some logic behind it, although I will admit I'm not in love with the pastels, to be honest. But any questions? Okay, hearing none. I'm gonna move on here. So then we get into the spaghetti diagram, and I apologize if you're calling in on your phone. This is gonna be real hard. Um, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk our way through a few different pathways, and we're gonna start off with our U19s. In fact, I'm gonna start off even earlier than that. I'm gonna start off with not even U17s, with 17-year-olds, because this season we have a Youth Olympic Games at the end of the season. It's scheduled for the end of October, beginning of November. If you are an athlete who will be not older than 17 years old at the time of those games, at the end of October, beginning of November, you are age eligible to go to the Youth Olympic Games. And the beginning of that journey for selection will be at our U19/U17 training camp in Montreal in January. I think it's the 20th to the something something. It's just under a week long. And we will be doing a selection at that camp to see who will be able to go to a Youth Olympic Games qualifier in Thailand towards the end of March. And that event conflicts with our existing U17, U19, U23 national championships, which is scheduled to happen at the Canada Cup in Calgary. We have no control over this. We also don't know much about this event in Thailand. But what we do know is that Boxing Canada will be supplying a coach and potentially two coaches, and that's about it. So if you're interested in qualifying for the Youth Olympic Games, you got to be 17 years old at the time of the actual Youth Olympic Games. Again, end of October, beginning of November 2026. And you need to go to that event in Thailand. We do not yet know which age, sorry, we do know the age category, which weight classes will be available. We can make a pretty good guess, but we don't know for sure. And we also don't know how many spots will be available for Canada. You would think we'd have one per weight class, but that is not how the Youth Olympic Games is run. It is a lot more like the Commonwealth Games, where the Commonwealth Games Society decides how many spots will be available for Canada for boxing. And what we do know is that Youth Olympic Games are being held in Dakar, which is in Senegal, in Africa, and that the IOC is very interested in having as many African nations participating in that event as possible. So my suspicion is that Canada is going to have fewer entry spots for all the participating sports, and we could be as low as just 2 spots available for boxing. But we don't have any hard details on that yet. All we know is that we are looking at needing to have a selection camp activity because we don't have any other good places to run a selection. And because of that weird age category, it doesn't neatly fit within our existing U19, U17 structure, or junior C and youth structure. So we don't personally, I don't love the idea of making selections based off of camp assessments, but we're in a situation that we're in. And I see a question, will the Youth Olympic Games be on anything under 17? The short answer is yes, but I'm not sure if we know the minimum age, because my sneaking suspicion is that there will be a minimum age of like no age gaps bigger than 2 years. So if an athlete is 15, I think they would very likely be considered too young to compete. And I think we would be very reticent to send an athlete who is even on the younger end of the eligibility, simply because we don't know what the quality of competition will be. But we anticipate hearing answers to that question and others, specifically around weight classes and how many athletes, shortly from World Boxing and the IOC. I mean, shortly would be great tomorrow. It'd also be a possibility that we don't actually know until well into November. So fingers crossed. Okay, then I'm going to talk a little bit about our U19 pathway. So we actually start off in the same place for U19s with that U19 training camp in January. The training camp is not part of a selection pathway for U19s, just so everyone knows. We've had a lot of people asking, can the national team run a U19, U17 training camp? And the answer is yes, we can. So we're going to try to do that. Um, um, Athletes who participate there, we would anticipate will then continue through the normal domestic competitions going forward through the year. At our U19 national championships, which is happening in late March in Calgary as part of the Canada Cup event. So that's our U19 nationals being held in Calgary in March. We will be doing a selection for 2 U19 events. The most important one is our U19 World Championships. And we do know about that because we don't have a firm location yet. But what we do know is that we will be running a minor training camp in Montreal, and then the team will be departing Montreal together, going to the U19 World Championships, and then they will be returning home. But our essentially our top ones at that competition, plus you need to have a competitive readiness evaluation. So if we, if you are fit and you are doing well in your training and you have competed well against a decent group of athletes in Canada, no issues there. However, if we have an athlete who is uncontested in Canada, we are going to do a competitive readiness evaluation because we want to make sure that we're not sending any Canadian athletes over who are going to be very challenged to make it through the first round. No one wants to fly halfway across our country for just one round, let alone halfway around the planet. The last U19 World Championships, we were blessed. It was in Colorado. It was close. It was easy to get to. But I suspect we are going to be over in Europe or in Asia for this. So it is what it is. The other thing that we will be selecting for is the coaches who are involved with our U19 program have said, yeah, look, it would be really great if we could have another activity available for those athletes. And we are currently looking at the possibility of going to either a World Open Club tournament in Finland, in Hungary, or a camp slash dual meet with the US in Chula Vista, California. And Chula Vista is just south of San Diego. It's right up against the Mexican border. And it happens to be a 2-hour drive from LA, which of course is where the 2028 Olympics will be. So there will be an opportunity for that team to go on sort of a rest day or rest afternoon from that activity up to see the 1984 Olympic Stadium and a lot of those Olympic sites, and visit the stadium that will be used for both the prelims and the finals for the LA Olympic boxing competition. So we're pretty excited about that. Plus, the Chula Vista Training Center is fantastic. I've been there with a number of different teams, the archery team, the athletics team, and the canoe kayak team, and it is an absolute paradise. So we think it's a great training location. The Americans are excited about being on board, and if we get really lucky, we may have some of the Mexican U19 team as well. Okay, so that rounds out our
Sorry,
Yep.
interrupt. I had a couple questions just
Mhm.
based on what the last little bit here. First of all, just to clarify, that will be Finland slash Hungary in a tournament or the Chula Vista dual match. Not both.
I'd characterize it as Finland or Hungary or Chula. And
Okay.
once we've got confirmation, either a firm confirmation, your thumbs up, thumbs down from the States, that will help us make a decision there. Because it could be that the States goes and gives us like a high quality group of athletes who will be there, or it could be that they're just scraping some bodies together. And we need a little bit more information from the prospective events, either in Finland or Hungary, about like how many athletes can we register? What is the expected level of competition going to be? Because we're looking to find a way to get more bouts in books, and particularly if we go to the States, we feel that there's a greater opportunity for us to be able to have, at least 2 bouts of full competition while we're there, plus some sparring. But if we're going to a single elimination tournament in Finland or in Hungary, the value proposition there, on dollars spent per bout may not hit the threshold that we feel it's an appropriate activity. The other thing that your question has cued me to is this may not necessarily be the same group of athletes who are selected to go to the U19 World Championships. The selection for the U19 World Championships will be made at our U19 Nationals. And it could be that athletes who are selected to that activity, which will be in August, choose not to go on the Finland or Hungary or Chula Vista trip. That doesn't mean that someone who does go on the Finland or Hungary or Chula Vista trip will have an opportunity to snatch or take away that U19 World Championship spot. Okay, that spot is earned only through participation at the U19 Nationals.
So basically, a gold medal at U19 nationals gets you worlds unless you decide not to do that.
Yeah, or unless there's some competitive readiness question there.
Right. One more question,
Yeah.
sorry. So there's a few that I'm aware of, U19 athletes going to the camp that starts this week.
Yep.
If they're not, like, I don't think any of them are going to be 17 next summer or next fall, so they're not being selected in January to go to the Youth Olympics. Is there a need for them to go? Obviously, it's best case scenario that they would go to every camp, but if the ones that are going to camp this week and getting that assessment done, can we safely say that if they missed January, that wouldn't be the end of the world for them, or is that not true?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there will be a lot of value at both of these camps, but I would suggest that unless an athlete has riches falling down from the sky upon their blessed heads, that maybe, only traveling, especially if you're coming from a long way away, only traveling to Montreal for a camp once a season is probably sufficient.
So what you're looking for is to have the national team get eyes on them, get an assessment, and then wherever that's accomplished, that's the point, I guess.
Yeah, and I think everyone needs to keep in mind the U23 assessment camp, the number of U19 athletes who are there is pretty low, right? You really have had to prove yourself strongly in order to even receive an invitation. But so this could be, I don't want to say necessarily it's a lower level camp in January, because I mean it would be difficult depending on who shows up. But the idea of the January camp is to have an even more protected environment for younger athletes who have not had opportunities to go and prove themselves yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great questions. Okay, so I'm going to jump now to looking at sort of a B teamer. Okay, so if you're a senior level athlete, whether you're world class or you're emerging or you're podium potential, your season will start at a national level at an invitational camp that will happen the week before the U17, U19 Youth Olympic Games camp in January. The participation at that camp, I would suggest, is not optional for anyone who's looking to represent Canada in competition. Yeah, it is possible that due to school or whatever that you have a good excuse, but if you're serious about wanting to represent Canada, I really think everyone should plan on being there. And from there, we will have athletes, and I apologize, this is a slightly older version. We were thinking about going to Strandja, but due to some registration limitations that we encountered with Strandja, we're going to switch this out to the Boxam tournament in Spain. And so athletes will go there. We are planning on having 2 per weight class in that competition. And from there, we will be we will have an opportunity for final selection for athletes to either go to the first World Cup that we are attending or the first World Challenge Cup. I would suggest that the vast majority of athletes will already have an indication from the national team as to whether they have been selected for World Cup or World Challenge competition before they come to the January camp, or potentially if we still have some unknowns at the January camp. So we're not going to make, decisions about, who goes after Boxam to, either the World Challenge or the World Cup with only a week and a half potentially of notice for the next competition. That wouldn't be fair. So those final selections will be done hopefully really early, because if you look at criteria, there's a lot of pre-selection criteria that's available. But final selection, much the way we did last January, for anyone who is there, right? We had those little meetings and we sort of talked about performance, and we're selecting you to go here as your first competition, or we're selecting this other athlete to go here for their first competition of the year. So we expect the same thing to happen. At the B level, Boxam, then going, and you should be planning on competition at the World Challenge Cup level. On this sheet, we've got 4 of those events identified. None of them have any dates or locations because we have received no information yet from World Boxing, unfortunately. We also have identified on this that Ramadan, of course, is happening from February 17th through March 19th, and we are not interested in participating in World Boxing level events during Ramadan. I'm not excluding the possibility completely, but we are going to be very careful about whether we actually select people for a competition during that time period. It would be very likely that we would be looking at World Challenge number 2, which, based on whispers and rumors only, is happening at almost the same time as World Cup number 2. This is actually a really good thing, because if we're able in January to confirm for athletes, you're going to the World Cup, you're going to the World Challenge Cup, and as it turns out, you can be on this virtually the same YTP, the same periodization, your same final prep and taper, your same weight cut protocol, in order to be ready for that sort of week of competition within the calendar year. So that would be great. Now, the chances that everything work out perfectly like that, probably pretty low, but it would be great if we could, because it just makes final selection that much easier. And then later in the season, we've got another World Challenge that right now we're being told will be sort of end of May, beginning of June, essentially the same timeline as the Quebec Open. And then there is a 4th World Challenge that is rumored to be on the schedule, but we have even fewer indications about, and that'll be in early September. And that would put it right between the Commonwealth Games and the Continental Championships. I would suggest very unlikely that we will be going. However, there is a possibility, especially if we've got good but maybe inexperienced international athletes, pardon me, who are not selected to either go to Commonwealth Games or the Continentals. Maybe a World Championships in September would be a great opportunity for them. So we want to keep that in our back pocket. And let's talk about our sort of A pathway. So for our top performing athletes, national team camp in January, senior camp, so earlier January. Then from there, Boxam tournament in Spain. Then from there, Brazil. There'll be an international training camp ahead of a World Cup, and then the World Cup. Then international training camp in June in Chula Vista. So we're a little shaky on the details there, but in Chula Vista with the US and with the elite team from Mexico, right? I'd already mentioned that possibility for the younger athletes, the U19s, but this is something different. This is for our seniors. From Chula, so from San Diego, then flying across the Pacific into China for World Cup number 3. Then Commonwealth Games. We've got the Commonwealth Games sitting down a level on this sort of mapping of levels of competition. And that's because the Commonwealth Games is not available to everyone in the world, right? It's Commonwealth countries only. So we consider it sort of a B level event. It's still great. It's still important that we go, and it's still important that we win medals there, but it's a B level event. Reminder, we only have 6 start spots. There are 14 weight categories available between men and women, but um, we only have 6 starts. So the selection process for that is going to be intense, let's say, considering that we've got a lot of great athletes. And then the next step for our A team, continental championships. And we do anticipate that there will be an international camp happening ahead of that continental championships. We are hearing rumors about Panama, which works great for us because Panama is right in the middle of the continents. But we have not got any firm dates yet, and that location is just rumors. The Continental Championships is going to be identified as the peak for this season. Yes, winning medals at the Commonwealth Games is important. However, the Continental Championships will be an opportunity for the entire Canadian national team to go and meet up against all of the other nations against whom we are going to be competing at the Pan Am Games in the following season in 2027. And the Pan Am Games, if you remember the previous slide, is one of those events where if you come top 2, you get a spot at the Olympics. That is the easiest way for our athletes to qualify, and it's how Tamara and Wyatt qualified for the Paris Olympics. So we want everyone to be prepared. We want to see who's in each weight category. We want as much information about each of those athletes as we can get. And we will be going with as full a team as we possibly can, with the caveat that, of course, we're not interested in sending athletes to a continental championships if we don't think that there is an opportunity for success in the first round. Then, looking like we've got a World Cup final. They're talking about Uzbekistan, but now we're starting to hear rumors about maybe it's going to be moved to Kazakhstan, and that'll be towards the end of November. It is at the same time as our national championships, which are scheduled for Cape Breton, or Elite National Championships, Cape Breton in November. And we do know that there will be an international camp wherever that World Cup is. We know there'll be an international camp there, so that would be the final event on our tour for the top level athletes. In the long format of this document, there is an explanation for what each one of these little snake and arrow, or snakes and ladders, chutes and ladders, what each one of these little arrows means, right? How good do I need to be to move up from a world challenge to a World Cup? It's explained. If I'm underperforming at a World Cup, at what level of underperformance will I get relegated down to the next level of performance down? Will I go from a World Cup to a World Challenge? All the details are in there. So you have to read the big version of the document. But we will continue updating and having this visual overview because it's a good place to start with conversation around what opportunities are available for athletes. 2 things that everyone needs to remember. First, you don't go directly from one event internationally direct to the other. You come home in between the majority of times. Okay, this diagram can sort of be confusing around that. Right? I mean, no one's going to spend an entire 6 months out just traveling the world without coming home. So just to make that clear. The other thing about how we've set up this document, there are other competitions on here that I haven't mentioned, and there's 2 classes of those. So there's the Class C, there's the dual matches, and we are, as I said before, we are working really hard right now to have more than just the Battle of the Prairies in Regina and the Melee Gala in Winnipeg. We're also hoping to add 2 more events on, and potentially 3. One will be at the Canada Cup. Team Philippines has already applied for visas, and they are interested in coming over and just doing a dual meet against Canada, this would be fantastic. So that's an opportunity for our athletes to go and compete there. And it could be that we would select athletes who would normally be going to the U23 nationals, which will be happening at exactly the same time, and we put them into a dual meet situation against the Philippines there. Then we've got Battle of the Prairies. Then we've got the possibility of an event either in what we call in Ontario the near north, so up in Sudbury, or there's potential for an event down in southern Ontario. We're just waiting to see which national teams are biting for the offers. So those events are a possibility. And then we've also heard rumors that there may be a possibility for an event towards the end of August out in Alberta, where we would have the same opportunity, a dual meet against an international team. So all these possibilities exist, and we're very excited that when we get more information, we'll be able to share as best possible. The intention of those dual meets is to provide a first national team opportunity to Canadian athletes so they compete at home in an environment that we control to the best of our abilities, as opposed to having to go outside the country. And we've been very lucky, particularly with our partners at Battle of the Prairies and at the Melee Gala, that they cover off the vast majority of expenses for those Canadians who are competing, which means it's very, very cheap to make those events happen. So thank you to our partners, and we hope to bring in more partners who are also able to meet that standard. The other component that's on here is there's this ghostly line of white events just below the red line across. What we have done is we've identified all of the major international open club run events. These are excellent, high quality international tournaments. We've had Canadians go in the past, and we are inviting clubs and provinces to go and say, you know what, we'd really like to go to the Copa Americana or the Eindhoven or the Silesian or Les Ceintures. And we will help facilitate getting you the information for you to run a tour for your club or your province. Those events will not be considered for selection purposes. This is strictly so that we can direct clubs and provinces to high quality tournaments where we know you're going to get a good competition, and you're going to have a good positive experience. You're going to rack up some international bouts, and then you will continue to try to pursue opportunities to compete with the national team. Okay. That information and links to the information on those events is included in the long format of the NTP document. Okay, that was a lot. Any questions on any of this? I'm not going to get down to the specifics of the spaghetti, obviously, but any brief questions or overview questions on what's been presented there with sort of those 4 distinct pathways? Okay, hearing none. Upcoming dates. So in 2 days, U23 assessment camp, then Elite Nationals, obviously the 26th to 29th. Want to remind everybody at Elite Nationals, we are going to have our first para competitions officially in Canada. It will not be part of the national tournament. I would characterize these, I have to be careful about what words I use, as a demonstration event, or an exposition event. But they will be proper registered bouts for our para competitors. And these are wheelchair athletes. There is a unpowered wheelchair class and there is a powered wheelchair class. But we're very excited to have this go on. We anticipate that we will very likely have, between 3 and 5 bouts happening. This is not going to be a huge rush of para athletes. But if you have a para athlete or an athlete in a wheelchair at your club and they are interested in finding out more about this, have them contact me, and the information is up on the website and it's in the handbook. Then looking into 2026. So we've got our Elite National Camp, 10th to the 17th. And then shortly after that, we've got that U17, U19 Youth Olympic Games camp on January 22nd through 26th. We will have registration links up shortly for that. And those registration links will be available in the NTP document. Then that first major event for us, BoxM in Spain. I'm pretty sure we actually do know the date for that, but unfortunately I don't have it explicit here, but we know it's in early February. And for more information, hit the national team plan. And then of course we've got sort of these other highlight events as we go down through the system. As always, I highlight for Commonwealth Games, there is an international pathway to getting selected, but there is also a domestic pathway to get selected. If you are interested in going to the Commonwealth Games at all, you really should be at Nationals in Winnipeg next month, because if no athletes meet the international qualification criteria through World Cup participation or World Challenge participation next season, we will go back to who was the best in each weight category at Nationals, and we will select them to go for whichever of the 6 start positions that we have. Because again, we only have 6 start positions. That's not by choice. That's what we got assigned by Commonwealth Games. So anyone who's interested in going, you have to go to Nationals. Okay. All right, and and just a reminder, Elite Nationals next year, 2026, will be in Cape Breton. We're very excited to be going back out to the Far East. Okay, other quick notes to be aware of: electronic boxing books. We continue doing minor tests on this as a concept. If anyone has any particular fears or excitement about this, let me know. I would suggest that we will continue doing minor demos with different software packages throughout the year through 2026. And if everything goes my way, we will never have to use another paper book again after that. But paper books will be available as backups and as souvenirs for people. Membership renewals. If you haven't renewed your membership yet, you have the opportunity to do so. I suggest that you do. There will be a price increase coming. This was announced 2 months ago to each of the provinces. I think this is actually the first time I'm announcing it to the actual membership. But January 1st, the prices on a number of our membership categories for the portion that comes to Boxing Canada will go up. And none of them are going up by a whole lot, but they are going up. And for a competitive membership or for a coach membership, the amount that they're going up is $5. So just so you're aware. Boxing Canada hasn't raised its fees in the last 2 seasons. And with the way inflation was going, that has put us in a bit of a precarious budgetary balance. So we're holding off. So if you're interested in getting a slight discount in addition to any discount that might be available through your province, I suggest that you renew early and tell your friends, because as much as it would be a pain if we don't get the extra money, having revenue coming in for memberships earlier rather than later is also extremely valuable for us. It makes it a lot easier to plan the season. Training logs. If you're one of the identified athletes who's using the training log system, we continue to appreciate you for that. If you are one of the athletes who has stopped using it, I'm not going to pull punches here. I'm disappointed. The data that we were getting was extremely valuable to the national team. I'll be preparing sort of a year-end report sort of at the beginning of December after nationals to sort of put together what did we learn about what training is actually going on, how many hours of training, what level of intensity is happening. Um, does it look different between weight classes? Does it look different between genders? We'll have a whole bunch of reporting coming back on that. If anyone is interested in our national team strength training program, it is available online. We know that a lot of people are using it. We continue getting good feedback. And like I said, it is available. And recordings of meetings. So a recording of this meeting will be or if I do a better job tomorrow, maybe a shorter job tomorrow when I do it at lunch. A recording of this meeting, whether it's this one or the other one, will be available up on our YouTube page for you to take a look at. If you were here, probably not worth taking a look at, but if there's something that you need more information on, you can certainly scrub back and forth and try to find it. Or if you know of someone who has missed this meeting, or you had to drift in and out of this meeting, it's something you can put on in the background, and maybe my smooth voice will help lull you to sleep at night. Okay. Next meeting. Very exciting. We're going to do this live from Winnipeg in real life on November 28th. So that's the fourth Thursday of the month. Although we may not, maybe a Friday. That's the Friday. So we're going to skip over the evening one. We're just going to do the daytime one. But for any of you who are in Winnipeg at the time, I would certainly encourage you to do it. We'll do it live in person. If you were looking for any information from previous updates, it's available for you. And of course, as always, the committee advisory group and update meetings dashboard is available for you to go and find information, both from high performance, but also from coaching, from officiating, and from just general information going out to the PTSOs. Okay, any questions from anyone? Okay, hearing none, I want to congratulate Jesse on his plants. Well done. I had the privilege, as I said earlier, of being over at the Calgary Boxing Club yesterday night. They have an entire wall full of like jungle plants, which is always an amazing thing to see in downtown Calgary. So, if anyone from that club is on, big thumbs up. I'm not sure I have a green thumb, but I do enjoy having greenery around me. So,
My wife keeps them alive. It's not me.
well, Jesse's wife, good work. Okay, and with that, I will call it an evening. I look forward to seeing everyone in a month in person.
Thanks, Chris.
If not this weekend. Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Chris. Bye.